37 minutes past the hour now. There's relative calm in Cairo this morning. Could signal a turning point in this 2-week-old uprising. Sunday, Egypt's new vice president met with opposition groups, including an unprecedented meeting with representatives of the Muslim Brotherhood. How significant was this?
Well, we're joined now by Mona Eltahawy. She's a journalist born in Egypt, spent a lot of years there, still has family in Cairo, and they've been giving you a, sort of an unvarnished view of what people think. What do you make of this meeting? Are you skeptical that this is really a move toward change?
Many of the pro-democracy demonstrators in Tahrir Square especially are very suspicious of the meeting that took place. For two reasons. They feel that the U.S. administration is pushing Omar Suleiman as an alternative to Mubarak, and they see Suleiman as very much part of the regime that they want to topple. And secondly, Omar Suleiman met, as you mentioned, with opposition, including the Muslim Brotherhood, and yet he continues to use this alarmist tone vis-a-vis the Brotherhood when he speaks to the American media. So they're really wondering what his agenda is, and they don't trust him at all.
But even the folks sitting at the table with the government, are they necessarily representative of the folks down at Tahrir Square?
Yeah, that's another great question too, because Mubarak, for all these years, for 30 years, he has never really allowed a good alternative to him. So we don't have a really strong, robust opposition. What we need is people who represent those demonstrators in Tahrir Square and across different parts of Egypt.
But do we have that right now?
We don't.
We don't now.
Right, no, but so what they're trying to do is they're trying to present names, especially young people, and they're trying to form committees that will represent them. So for now they're saying, okay, you guys must remember you did not start this uprising. So they're also feeling very wary about what kind of concessions are being made in their name.
And meanwhile, while all this is taking place, Hosni Mubarak is still there.
Exactly.
I mean, he has resisted calls to leave the country or even to step down as president. And so what needs to be the tipping point, I guess, in terms of this? Because people still say they're going to come out and protest, but at the same time, their key demand has still not been met.
Absolutely. And the independent newspaper in the UK yesterday came out with a story that was quite shocking to many Egyptians I know, that the US administration's envoy to Cairo last week, Wisner, who was supposed to go there and talk to Mubarak and kind of speak about this transition of power, is actually employed by a company that the Mubarak regime employs. So a lot of people are sitting there thinking, okay, what's going on? Whose side is everybody on? And as you said, Mubarak is still there, and the demonstrators insist they will not go. So it feels like it's some kind of delaying tactic that the regime is using to try to divide Egyptians.
Are you getting any signals that some people, maybe 2 weeks into this, are starting to get a little protest weary and say, hey, at some point, I got to feed my family and I need to get back to work?
That's exactly what the regime wants, and that's exactly what the pro-democracy demonstrators are worried about. That the more Mubarak kind of digs in his heels, the more people will say, well, look, he said he's going to leave in September. Why don't you go? But the thing is, as he says, I'm going to leave in September and tries to make all these concessions, the military police, his military police, continue to arrest activists and human rights activists and bloggers. So there's a general air of distrust, and people just want him to go, and they want to get on with this peaceful transition, but they don't know who to trust because so many people have different agendas, basically.
And I want to ask you about that because we're hearing that the first journalist died as a result of the conflict from gunshot wounds sustained during the riots. And we are also hearing about this Google executive who had been detained, Wael Ghonim. He is expected to be released today. But again, this question about whether or not this crackdown, the worst of this government crackdown, is over or whether it's continuing. What's your take?
I definitely feel it's continuing from the number of names I hear of people being detained. I mean, the youngest person to have died so far during the uprising is a 10-year-old from 2 bullets. So it just makes you wonder. I sometimes feel the Mubarak regime gives with one hand and takes from the other, because while they're promising Wael Ghonim is going to be released, this Google exec that you mentioned, everybody's just saying, wait till we actually see him released, because they've made so many promises they have not kept. So until people see actual concessions, here's a real concession the Mubarak regime can make. They can say, we'll lift the emergency law that has been in place for 30 years. Why isn't the administration pushing for this? So we need to see concrete concessions before we can trust the Mubarak regime.
All right, but that's on the table right now. It's at least being talked about. That's been in place for 3 decades.
That's a start.
That's a good start. That's a huge start. All right, Mona Eltahawy, it's great to have your perspective. We appreciate you coming in once again for us this morning. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Good to see you, Mona.